I'm excited for today's recording because we are not doing an interview. We just get to chat.
Hey.
But I did give you a heads up on where I felt like we should start.
You did, and I also grazed feeling the energy and the look of the text because I like to not know what our great conversation is going to be about. So I was just like, we got this, and I'm just showing up because that's how I feel organic flow works best. So I know the vibe. I felt the vibe. I felt the collective vibe.
I was interested in what your experience is like because I know that you do a lot of work with the collective, or I mean, maybe individuals within the collective. But like, what does that actually look like for you?
This year has been just fascinating because we're just so pumping up the energies with the evolution and consciousness. And there's been kind of an extreme trajectory to how people are responding.
I'm curious if you mean extreme in one way or the other. Like, is it polarized still, or are you saying what you're noticing is specifically in a singular direction?
Well, it's both because we're such wild animals with such a multidimensional nature to the soul and to how we're going to receive these energies. Case in point, these solar flares we've been going through for months now.
Right.
Woo! Some people, it's like I talk to them on a Monday and they're super grounded and they're doing super awesome and they're like jazzed up and they're tapped into the frequency of unconditional love and they're just like lit, from the inside. And then you talk to them within like 24 hours and the frequency shift has, come down, or it's purging something from the field because that's all the sun's really doing. It's purging the lower density and then it's up leveling the higher strands of DNA to really activate the light body of the collective. And some people have been on the path for a very long time. So for me, it has been like these extreme ups and downs, but the difference is what would have probably thrown me off the path or maybe sent me into a shadow or underworld moment, you pivot and you bounce back with like this extraordinary quickness that I find extra juicy and yummy. However, I've seen the opposite side where some people, it's like they thought they were done, with that layer of whatever they've been purging or working through in the shadow realm, and they get kind of stuck. So it's really important as these opportunities for complete quantum leaps in the timeline, as far as these energies that are coming in, it's really important that no matter what's happening on the ground and what's happening in the human, animal, and the psyche, that we're choosing unconditional love. Even if it's like, for me, I can give a perfect example. It's a shadow day. I'm going to be with the underworld. I am a Scorpio moon, so I can go very dark. Okay. But I'm like, no. I'm staying in the exalted Scorpio. This is Phoenix medicine. This is something coming up so that I can fly, that I can rise above it. So it doesn't have to keep being that you go down into these depths, into this abyss. So I've seen a lot of persons oscillating. And then I've seen some people who really thought that they were way beyond all of this, that they were really coming into really owning the 5D body, and they've been really thrown off by what's come up this particular year. As far as the collective, I feel a little sometimes disengaged from the mainstream due to the nature of my work, as most people that are coming to me are way showers and light workers and people on that path.
Oh my gosh, right?
So
I experienced
curious.
that too.
So, I mean, what would your feeling about it be here and now with who you encounter on your show and just in your personhood?
Oh, I liked what you said that you're disconnected from the mainstream.
Yeah.
I am significantly. Like, I actually feel like I live in a bubble at times because everybody that I communicate with on a regular basis are one, people that I've chosen to be in my inner circle, or two, people I'm engaging with for my interviews. I mean, sure, I'll have interactions, like
Yeah.
going to the grocery store or whatever, but I just mean like when it comes to actually connecting with people, they're all on a similar wavelength with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard for me to get out of that at times and just kind of realize that there is a mainstream and there is like uh, sometimes I do see it and it can be jarring. It can
Yeah.
be very jarring.
Yeah, I'm referencing the mainstream. I have a lot of clients who are on our path and like on our frequency, but they haven't brought it out to, maybe their families of origin or their work community. So case in point, they have what some might consider like a really 3D job. And they work in some pretty toxic environments. So a lot of what I'm hearing about the collective is when these like angelic light workers come in and they're talking about how they're experiencing collective energies in their immediate environment. So that's been interesting to witness too. And one thing I've noticed over and over and over again, and this has been happening for years, but it's much more intensified right now, is that before they could kind of put on their Clark Kent suit and go into the office and like pretend that they were like everybody else. And now they're like, I just want to be Superman. Like, I can't be in this environment anymore.
I love that. I can kind of relate to that too. I feel like leading up to this year, actually, it was spring of this year, it was much easier to, I don't really want to say ignore, but accept where the blocks were. I mean, I was fully aware of them. Well, maybe not all of them, but I knew that I had blocks, but I also recognized that it was in the winter season, and we should all have lower expectations for ourselves and what we're like going to progress through in the winter season, because I think that that is the time of rest and reflection and recovery.
Definitely.
And I understood. I was like, okay, spring is coming. Spring season is on the horizon. And I was excited and I felt like that inspiration, that drive to hit the ground running. And it was so funny because the way I explain it is I hit the ground running straight into my blocks. Like just full speed, smacked into those left and right. It was so intense. Like I said before, like I could accept where those blocks were and I wasn't feeling pressure about like breaking through them. Like I feel like that was when I could wear the disguise, you know?
Well, absolutely. And what I'm noticing is that that's what this energy is kind of doing to everyone in different, almost like a microdose. Some people are feeling it more than others, is just
Mhm.
that you're starting to see what's still rising to be healed. But instead of this, like, I must fix this or this is bad, there's a capacity or an increased threshold to be with it that I don't know that people that are on the path had as well as they're having now. And it's not because they want to have it. It's kind of like the energies in the universe are kind of forcing you to be there. And it's like, hey, are you really walking the medicine? Like, are you living up to what you say you believe? And if you're not, look in the mirror and be with it and love it. And I think for me and for so many people I work with, that self-love, that self-compassion, a lot of us are really good at putting it out to others and feeling it when it's coming from the other. But to actually embody it unconditionally, like in a Christ consciousness way, where it's like the nastiest monster can look you right in the eye, and that monster can have your reflection, and you're like, I love you. I have compassion for you. I'm okay with you being here. I don't want to just make you go away. And that threshold and tolerance within the spiritual collective seems to be expanding this year, and that's really exciting.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like I want to wear the cape now. Although I've been hitting so many blocks though, like I thought that that was going to be like a spring thing and then like summer was going to be like me thriving in the results of the hard work of breaking through all my blocks in spring. No. Absolutely not. I am still finding more and more and more and just I mean, even new ones that weren't there before have like landed in my path, and I'm just like, okay, I can sit with this. I'm working on my mindset right now regarding money because I do realize that a lot of my financial struggle I feel like has been subconscious limiting beliefs, and I'm trying to work on my narratives regarding money and the energy that I'm putting out in association with that. There's just so many that it's about to be fall here next month, very soon, and I'm still in that. It's by design for sure.
Well, yes, that's what I was going to elaborate on. Like, truthfully, you know this about me, Ella. I'm not a black or white thinker. For me, everything exists in a threshold, a multitude, and there's just so many different ways you can receive anything depending on where you're coming from in the empowerment of your perspective. That said, working in spiritual communities, you hear a lot about the predictions and, the energy forecast and the astrology and all of that. And I will say a lot of people thought, we're 5 years post-pandemic, all these things that have shifted, we're going to start to see this ginormous change in the stage. But the truth is, as I've said to so many of my near-death experiencer friends, we're in the dying right now. Like, our
Yeah.
ways of being, our old systems, like you bring up the limiting beliefs behind money, that's so pertinent for so many people, particularly in the feminine. Because our sense of worth has come from these very, like, really patriarchal, outdated, like, they've indoctrinated that into eons. And we may not believe that in our physical bodies, but we were birthed by women that lived through that over and over again. So there's a level of ancestral programming that's very, very important. Also, the karmic comes in. And now, simultaneously, all of these people are kind of like, what's going on? Even the people that aren't on this path. Like, I mean, that's the thing. I don't take a lot of these cases because I don't work in strict mental health anymore. But the amount of what I call 911 emails I've gotten this year are like overwhelming, because people are rushing to the systems they know, which are like the traditional medical system, the traditional psychological system, and they're not getting the answers they want. And they know something more is happening, but they can't quite put their finger on it because they haven't been in these environments. They don't have the language you and I have and some of the experience. So I am witnessing, it's like a very uncomfortable shaking to get their blocks activated. But many cases, these folks don't even know they have blocks. Like, they wouldn't even know that language. Something is failing and something isn't working. And so it's like the collective is going through this. Our whole way of being is broken. And how do we approach that? And I mean, it's just like when the body's dying in an NDE, it's going to suck. I don't know a single death experiencer that won't tell you that death sucks. Like, dying sucks. Okay.
Yeah.
Waking up in this ineffable peace and like being in the presence of God's spirit and creator, that's it, unexplainable. And there's such beauty in that. But going through the death process sucks. And from the way the current energies are presenting, it's quite possible, because of the amount of systems that have been poisoned, for lack of better terms, or were built on lies, or aren't really here to support the empowerment of people. Quite the opposite, is to take power away. Those systems are dying, and the dark always fights as it's dying. And so it's very loud, like on the ground, and it can sound a little bypassy and a little naive when I say this, but it's actually really true. Just because it's very dark up here doesn't mean that the amount of incoming light or assistance is deplenished. It's quite the opposite. It's like, it looks so horrible if you actually listen to any of the mainstream or receive that energy, but there are legions of angels. There is legions of light. I mean, it's really overwhelming, the amount of assistance we have right now, but you have to stay in resonance to those type of frequencies to receive them. And so many people are suffering in the mainstream collective that they're completely blocked from feeling that unconditional love that's pouring through.
It's so crazy to me still.
Mm-hmm. I thought about that today, as we're approaching, you and I are going to be at a conference soon.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking back to like 6 years ago when I spoke there and did that for the first time. And I'm like, oh, I was still wearing my little white coat. I was still like part of that system. And it changes so rapidly when you make the decision to walk away. So I have deep gratitude for the fact that we have our own safe bubble.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I have deep empathy for the people that haven't found their bubble yet and are really in a disqualified place based on the state of the world and the collective energies.
Yeah, I mean, for those people in particular, I mean, would you point them in a direction? Would you try to meet them where they are? Like,
You nailed on the head with the second one. I never believe in like fixing or taking an action oriented movement until what's happening in the lived experience of the now, the most tangible aspect, is touched. Case in point, public speaking still makes me nervous when I'm on a stage. If I were to ignore, the butterflies in my tummy and just launch into something, but completely ignore the body will respond. It will continue to do things to captivate my attention. The mind, the spiritual body, all of them behave the same way. So, right now, what I see as a call to action for the collective in any capacity, whether they're on our path or they're, still really in the mainstream, is to be with the grief. When there's death, whether it's
yes,
culture, whether it's, a system, whether it's the financial, whatever, be with the grief. The grief is the portal. We push away grief. We think of grief as bad. We think of death as bad. But death, again, is a transition. And if we can look at what's happening in the collective and in these systems as death with the opportunity of rebirth, because that's all these energies are doing. They are purging everything we've pushed down for way too long. And they're saying, you didn't look at that. And because you didn't look at that, all of these people are suffering. And all of these systems you've created are suffering. And the suffering just seems to have a ripple effect. Well, if it's not working, if we've pushed hyper individualism, and materialism and all these different things, the patriarchy, whatever, you can go on and on and on with the labels. If we've pushed those to the precipice of what we care about, and our entire system, our entire collective is becoming ill, and the systems are crumbling, then what do? We come up with something better. And I really feel no matter where people are in their own evolutionary journey right now, that's the call. And the discomfort is the invitation.
yes, I love that so much. The discomfort is the invitation. For generations, the collective has had this subconscious limiting belief that there is a difference between good and bad, or that that should be some sort of judgment or distinction. And I just don't think it ever should be, because people can look at something that is uncomfortable and deem it as bad. But if you look back on your previous experiences and recognize that all the bad things had turned out to shape you in the most profound and positive ways.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were to recognize discomfort as love how you said is the portal, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like suffering is the way out, essentially. It's
Mm-hmm.
the path to enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that if we could rewrite that narrative collectively, that discomfort is something that we should try to shy away from or avoid, if and we saw it as an invitation, then that would be like ideal.
I'm totally with you. And the problem is so many people have forgotten their sovereign power because we've just grown up in a world where we give the power away. And so a lot of this like collective discomfort, again, it's a very tantric term to say invitation, but they don't judge good or bad. So returning to what you were saying, it's kind of like you're with it all because good and bad are ultimately part of the one. And so, as part of the one, you're not going to separate it as this one, I value this one more and this one less. No, they're all part of God.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Tantra actually means union. So, if you want to be in union with God, you have to allow all of the faces of God to reveal themselves. And those exist within each and every one of us. And so, yes, we have this invitation, but it's like these systems have taken power away. And so there's a multitude of discomforts that are happening. There's the individual, the microcosmic discomfort that's occurring, which is maybe certain circumstances, finances, home, relationships that are occurring and people are uncomfortable. But in a bigger umbrella picture, we have the macrocosmic, and that's creating another level of discomfort. But when you look at them together, the opportunity is, well, none of this is working. So if this isn't working, who am I giving my allegiance to? Do I want to pay attention to the news, which wants to keep me powerless?
Mm.
Or do I want to turn that off and say, you don't tell me what's happening in my world. You don't tell me who's my leader. You don't tell me what to believe. You have that power. But if your whole life you've been giving it away, and if giving it away has been normalized as it has in so many familial systems, then you forget that you are a sovereign creator, that you are literally co-creating your reality. And until you get uncomfortable enough to say, I'm going to disengage from these things and take my power back, you will continue to suffer because you're going in a endless feedback loop. But the minute you pull back and say, hey, here's my boundaries, and walk away, you can change the narrative.
No, I was actually just talking with Austin about that yesterday because growing up, he was put on pharmaceuticals for his migraine issues
Mm-hmm.
that he had. And we were talking about the pharmaceutical industry will try to solve everyone's problems with pills. And ultimately, that just alleviates the discomfort just enough so that you don't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
And he was able to make the decision to get off the pharmaceuticals, and he actually discovered that yoga was his way out. And he was talking about how grateful he was that he didn't have to be on pharmaceuticals all the time.
Mm-hmm. Our discomforts have been minutely satiated to keep us powerless.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
it's as if every system kind of knew the same way of doing it, insofar as I'll just give them this and then they'll just kind of be little sheep and comply. And
Yeah.
you don't get to the etiology of what's going on, whether it's mental, physical, spiritual, if you're just putting a band-aid on it.
Yeah.
And that's why shadow work and like going into the underworld or being intimate with the discomfort, not like, hi, I know you're there and I'm going to go about my day, but being like, no, I'm overwhelmed by shame today, or I'm overwhelmed by depression. What's it saying? Intrinsically, every expression of mind body is a messenger.
Hmm.
And if they're treated as a messenger, then it's understood intuitively that they have something to say. Well, if we're just suppressing what the mind wants to say, I can give you an example. You brought up migraines. When I first came back from my NDE, my third eye was so overactive that I would get migraines to the point I lived in sunglasses. Like I always had a hat on, I always had sunglasses on. I was seeing the neurologist. I have a traumatic brain injury from coma. So there was the complication from that, extreme photosensitivity because of my after effects. And so I was just like, so upset. Like I survived this like near death thing, and here now I can't be around lights and I have to wear shades all the time, and it was awful. And then because I knew that the allopathic side effects of the drugs were toxic to me and they altered so many things I was uncomfortable with, I went on a deep path to find what works for me. And it was something as simple as grounding the third eye. Like I just had to wear something that helped ground the third eye so it wasn't constantly going at like 99% when it didn't need
Really?
to. And the migraines went away. The
That's
light
amazing.
sensitivity is still there, but the migraines went away. And so, but part of it, I mean, I would like always say that everything again is multidimensional. So what I had to work with at the same time I was learning what oils and what crystal helped ground it, I had to also look at the limiting belief of suffering, because there was part of me that believed I couldn't fully heal, that I had to suffer, that it was part of my, karmic obligation. And that came from a multitude of layers, from the maternal, from the ancestral, from the karmic. So again, invitations. And sometimes it is like you're peeling a layer back and it reveals something. And then if you're paying attention, there's another invitation hidden in there. But you've got to pay attention. If your whole goal or your whole agenda is to take away the symptoms, you're in trouble, because you're practicing basically Western medicine and what we've all been indoctrinated with. You're never going to get to a curative healing modality if you're just piling stuff on and ignoring the etiology.
Yeah, so I remembered that you tried the ketamine therapy, right? At one
Mm-hmm.
point. Would you say, or well, first of all, have you tried hallucinogens other than
Yes.
ketamine? Yeah,
Yes.
okay. Would you recommend the ketamine therapy over like other kinds of hallucinogens?
I think it's case by case, truthfully.
Okay.
Personally, I struggle with things such as mushrooms and ayahuasca now because my after effects are so severe that it's almost like I'm on a psychedelic all the time. So to intensify visuals and things of that nature, I was concerned because I had done psychedelics prior to my NDE. And
Mm-hmm.
I've microdosed them since, but I've never taken a copious amount with the knowing that I'm already so open. Okay, so that's personal to me. My only caveat to using plant medicines in particular is that when someone has a heavy use of SSRI history, because they have to be off of it to use it. But I'm seeing so many people going and taking them that are on SSRIs, and that can cause serotonin syndrome, which can really, really, really be serious.
I don't know what an SSRI is.
Oh, it's an antidepressant. So if people are on
Okay.
high dose antidepressants, because right now in plant medicine, they're advocating to use different things for different
Right.
ways for the treatment of depression and PTSD and a multitude of other psychopathologies. That said, what worries me is that because we're still dealing with state to state legislator, and this is a new modality to the collective, insofar as
Mm-hmm.
the resurgence of some theories from the 60s and 70s that didn't have the clinical support that we now have.
Mm-hmm.
If someone is taking SSRIs and they misappropriate plant medicine, it can have serious, serious consequences. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
seeing that addressed enough in the community, so that concerns me. With ketamine, there's a difference only insofar as you must go into a clinical setting to receive it. So you're going to have to
I think
go
that's
through the
good.
process of revealing what you're on, going through certain tests, et cetera, if you're going to a reputable, legitimate place. For
Mm-hmm.
me, ketamine was a positive bridge because I was working more on coming back into the body because I'd been so disconnected from the body as a trauma survivor. And then in coma, I was kind of catapulted back in. And so it felt like for years, I was kind of like with the body, but not in the body. And I knew ketamine had a very deep dissociative effect more than a visual psychedelic effect. So that is why for me, I chose it. And the other thing I want to say that's unique to ketamine, and ketamine's being widely abused in club scenes and everything else to this day. So I understand there's a dichotomy co-occurring. There's what's happening in clinics where it's being used positively, and there's what's happening on the streets. I'm not advocating for recreational
Right.
use
Right.
at non-clinical doses. However, at clinical doses with the right supervision to the right patient, it's pretty amazing because the suicide is one of the hardest things to treat, suicidality in people. Quite often, that's where psychotropics will come in. And that's why we have a black box warning on SSRIs, which is in the 90s, they had to put this on Prozac and Paxil and whatnot because people would get better and then they'd complete suicide because
Oof.
they finally had the energy to get out of bed. So they weren't all the way better, but they were enough to function. And then that's when they would complete. So these drugs were forced to put something called the black box warning on it to say that you could actually have an increased chance if you take these medications and to be mindful of it. Ketamine is unique. When I first read this, as a former clinician, I was like, nah, they're making this up. But like the Mental Institute of Health put out a thing saying that they believed that ketamine was potentially the mental health care of the future because of its efficacy with suicide. And when I went in to receive my treatments for PTSD, I had told them like what had scared me was that after years and years and years of doing this work and being on this beautiful path, I had an episode come back on, and it was related to my own amplification of it. I was writing about past trauma and it got reactivated, but it was coming up over and over again. It was starting to scare me because I heard that old dark monster being like, you don't want to be here, just get out, all the suicidal kind of stuff. And it came on fast, but it was coming on furious. And I was like, I don't have time to deal with 6 weeks of SSRIs to see if this helps. Like, we need to squash this now. And when I
Mm-hmm.
read this research on ketamine, what I found out was that people could do these consecutive sessions and they would literally have a reduction in symptoms by 80 to 90%. And for that to happen without staying on a medication, because basically you take the medication and then once you complete the tiration, you stop. There's no more, at least in the way that I did it. So for me, it was like, okay, we can get, they call it the brightening, where it lifts the mood. for the first few days post-treatment, but it lifts it so drastically when the sessions are done in succession that the people can come off meds, they can go back to work, they can go back to school, and there's almost a complete reduction in symptoms. There is no protocol at present in mental health care that has that kind of efficacy. So I do believe plants, as you brought up, I believe mushrooms have that capacity when used correctly. And I believe ayahuasca in right cases, but I would say ayahuasca is the one that I've seen the most misuse of as far as it not being done appropriately with the right guidance and the right containment. Because if you have someone that goes in floridly psychotic and they don't have someone that's grounding it, that's making sure it's a clear space and is holding sacred space and grounding for the person, you can actually amplify the symptoms. So again, we're kind of learning as we go here, but we do at least have these opportunities to investigate this here and now. And that's beautiful.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you really dug into that. I'm glad I asked that question before I just broke into it, because you were talking about the way that we meet the shadow. I have previously done mushrooms, I guess you can say. I've utilized plant medicine, and I thought for a long time like I couldn't have a bad experience on them. I just vibrate on a level in which doesn't permit that sort of experience. But I noticed something the last time that I did it, and I was just like, wow, that's really interesting. I want to kind of reflect on that. And what it was is that after having this like beautiful experience of recognizing that I had this block, I faced it, I accepted some things. Near the end of the trip, I was going to sleep, and I started recognizing all these really dark visuals, like with my eyes closed. And after having such a positive experience, I was like, okay, let's see where this goes. Immediately as I observed dark images and kind of like scary things that were trying to present themselves, as soon as I was just like, I see that, I'm accepting that, and I'm kind of going with it, it completely just fizzled out and went away. And I was actually a little disappointed because I was like, I've never had a bad trip. I was ready for it. Like, I wanted to do some diving into the darkness and the shadows, and it was just like, no. And I realized that it was in that acceptance of it and the fact that I didn't fight, I didn't feel resistance to it, that it just went away entirely altogether.
That's very commonplace, and I'm finding it even with these frequencies that we talked about before. When you acknowledge the dark without fear, you're broadcasting your light, and darkness dissolves when you broadcast your light. It feeds off fear. With these energies that are coming in, similar to a bad trip, I have energetic boundaries I practice every night before I go to sleep. I set it up. I'm like, we're going into the astral. This is what I'm willing to do. This is what I'm not willing to do. We're going to the higher realms, no dark stuff, blah, 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 blah. And I do it every single night. Okay.
I love that.
Yeah, and I have to, because I'm just so open and porous. And like, there were times, and I say this to all my way showers that come to me, and I hear this a lot with people that self-identify as what they're experiencing, which I try to keep a distance from that, because whenever we're saying I am, we're literally saying that's our frequency. So I am feeling, not I am. I am, leave that for the eternal, but don't put the temporal feeling states and emotions on it, because then you wear that weight, you wear that density. And so I know that I'm very open, and I know that things can come in through the astral. And what you just described, that's a perfect example of you were witnessing the astral realm. The astral realm is, really what's between us and the higher realms. And unfortunately, there's a lower portion to that, a lower quadrant. And some of them like to be scary, and they like to play with you. And even though I've set up these energetic boundaries, when these solar flares started happening, I said to my friends, I had to call on Metatron and knock some astral weirdos out. And I'm not used to that happening anymore, because I've set these boundaries. And it's just because on so many levels, what we're experiencing in the seen realm, the physical plane, there has long been a spiritual war, and there has long been this purging of light and dark in the astral. So when you're taking any kind of plant medicine, and that's where, for those that have a propensity towards psychosis or family history of it, we have to be mindful, because if someone has that activated within their system and they see that, they likely aren't going to broadcast light. They're going to go into fear. And when you go into fear, that's when the psyche can split and say, oh, that's not me, or though that's an entity or whatever. And then that energy just grows and grows, and you call in more of that kind of experience. So it's just very important to be mindful that we're using these medicines in containers, or you have the self capacity to call in the light. So, and it doesn't have to be a literal call, like you just being in your power, that was the call to light, and it dissolves. But you have to be in that. I mean, I think I've told you this story about my my then 6-year-old, who's now 12, crazy. But he had some scary thing happen at night one night, and I heard him scream, and I ran across the house, and all of a sudden I hear him saying, I am made of light. You cannot be in my room. I know. And next thing he knows, he's like, it's fine. I'm going back to bed, mama. I'm like, okay, I wish I had that confidence at 6. But just knowing that you stand in your power, like they want to scare you, but in reality, they need food and they seek light as food. And if they can get you scared, then they can feed off that food. And it's unfortunate, but it's part of the lower realms. We're now transitioning into energies where we'll be so much light that that's a non-issue. But first, we have to purge through all the density we're currently in. And that obviously is taking time.
I mean, I thought about it when we were talking earlier about the discomfort and how our initial instinct is to move away from the discomfort, right? Like if I would have met that with resistance and tried to move away from it, that would have not been standing in my power.
Totally.
I think that it's just so valuable to take that and apply it in all areas of life, coming back to the invitation, recognizing the discomfort as an invitation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This one phrase, I studied tantric meditation for a very, very long time, and there's 108 pathways to tantra. Everyone associates it with sexuality. That's one of the 108. Okay. So it's a very minute portion of what tantra actually is.
Interesting. 108. Isn't there 108 beads in a mala?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. All of that sacred number has a purpose in a multitude.
Putting things together. Wait, why?
Yes.
Sorry, I know that's totally
well,
it
depends on the tradition that you're looking at. Okay. So it depends if you're coming from a Hindu perspective, if you're coming from a Buddha. There's different ways to it, but it is a divinely sacred number because there's that many expressions in their ways of being to the one. So it's like different expressions of God, different gods and goddesses, different energies. But one way to be devoted in Tantra is through sexuality. There are a multitude of others. And so I studied tantric meditation for a long time, simply because I was attracted to and understood that language of invitation, because so much of my training in psychology taught me to split good, bad, as you brought up in the beginning, right, wrong, light, dark. And I kept saying to myself, although I fancied myself more of a shadow worker at that time than a light worker, because I was really deep into, talking about how real light work is done in the dark. You have to go through all of those shadowy layers to really come up and have that embodied light. Everything else is bypassing. And so I really went into Tantra for that reason, but they utilize that language all the time, invitation, invitation. And if we could accept our emotions, accept even our experiences, our like relation to self every single day as a holy invitation. In Tantra, they say you breathe in, you breathe out, you're dying in every breath. So it's like each in between, and that little tiny in between that you don't feel, you're back with God. And then you take another breath and you're here. So the invitation is, if you're really dropping into these cycles of breath and the expression that we're literally giving birth and dying over and over again, and that some part of us, some embodied soul part keeps us going, then even, stubbing your toe into the wall and breaking it when you least expect it becomes an invitation. Because it's like, oh, I just walked into a wall and broke my toe. Oh, this sucks. I don't like this. Well, once it takes you off the trajectory for that day, because you're probably going to have to go get care or tape it up or whatever, what's coming up for you? Is it you feel powerless? Is it you feel sad? Is it you're mad you lost control over your day? Is it all of the above? Because all of those feelings are temporal energies, and those energies are master communicators. And if you listen to them, they're going to redirect you onto a better pathway for better invitations. But if you don't listen, you're going to stub your toe again. And, or it's going to be your hand next or whatever, but you're going to keep re-experiencing the same disqualified vibration until you meet the core emotions. And when you begin to meet those core emotions, they dissolve, just as the astral energies and scary stuff did. But they have to be met, and they have to be met with compassion.
Yes. Thank you. That's the point I was trying to get at, and you just articulated that amazingly. I appreciate that so much.
You're welcome.
Oh my gosh. Yay. This is why I love talking with you. I want to get a point across, and then you just meet me there. It's like I plant the seed and then you just blossom it.
Well, and that's the beauty of co-creation. I mean, that's where we're
Yes.
heading. Like, I feel like this is why just you're like, oh, I just want to have conversations, but it's more than conversation, because the truth is we're exchanging medicine.
Mhm.
We're storytelling, which is the most ancient form of medicine. Okay, before we wrote things down, I mean, the Druids, they didn't even let people know their practices. They would only come together in sacred ceremony, tell stories. And if the resonance and whatnot was there, then you received the invitation to participate in the ceremony. But they didn't write it all down. It was exchanged through energy. And we've forgotten as a culture the potency of energy as a currency. We got so materialized and money and this and that, but to the heart, to the human, relation and energy exchange is, to me, the greatest form of nourishment.
Absolutely. And it's cool too, because I have felt called towards learning more about Tantra for a long time. Well, I mean, at least a few months. So not like a really long time, but it's funny that comes up in conversation. Typically, when things are inviting you, they come up from here and there and all different places. And that's an energy exchange. That is another invitation for me personally that is just like, yes, this is affirmation. This is the direction you need to go and what you need to learn next.
That's, again, part of what I would say is a curative and, again, nourishing factor of when you choose to disengage from the things that aren't feeding you. Because you and I have made choices within our circles, within what we choose to give our energy with. We understand that our energy is currency and that you just don't put it anywhere. And because of that, you're going to attract and resonate with people that have a similar belief system. And that's a great part of this kind of work and these kind of conversations, because you become more and more in resonance and the synchronicities just start to expand.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I had no idea we'd talk about Tantra. Who knows?
Yeah. The resonance is a big deal. I understand and recognize the aspect of resonance, because I would have people like my sister, for example, or like I had some old friends that I was really close with. I mean, we went separate directions, and I would try to reach out, and I'd be like, hey, let's like cultivate this connection. Like, why are we not talking anymore? And it wasn't until after I recognized that we just are on different wavelengths. We operate in completely different realms, and it's not anything personal towards me. Like, there's nothing wrong with me as to why they don't have a desire to connect. It just comes down to resonance. We're no longer resonating, and it's okay to release those people and accept that you will then resonate with those who are on your same frequency. It was when I accepted and understood that I actually really started attracting my people and creating that inner circle that I mentioned earlier.
Yes, completely, completely. I feel for a lot of those that are new on this path, that's sometimes the hardest part because they have their family of origin or they have the best friend or they have, and I know I went through this post coma. It's like there's this desire to be normal or to fit into what you knew, have the 9 to 5 and have the whatever that's like kind of societal norms. The more we attempt to constrict to fit into those environments, the more we suffer and the more invitations will come up as far as this isn't working, this isn't working, this isn't working. When we allow ourselves to disengage from that and kind of be in that place where so many people earlier in the path go, which is where you're alone for a while, that really tests your muscle. That really allows you to say, what do I really stand for and what do I really believe? And as you come more into that power, that's when that resonance really starts to thrive. And so it's a very beautiful thing. I do see that shifting as the timeline shift, yet there is a propensity towards isolation in those early phases just because you're letting go of the old. Again, it's a death process, letting go of what wasn't working, allowing it to dissolve and die, and then, like the spring, resurrecting and giving birth to what actually nourishes you and brings beauty and abundance into your life. I think one of the most essential and beatific aspects of these current energies is that we are blessed with all of this Jupiter energy right now, which is like expansion, 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 abundance. It's your divine birthright. It's like the opposite of what most people believe. Like, you are, in God's eyes, you are perfectly abundant. And everything you want, you are worthy of, and you are loved. And in some other timeline, it's already yours. The only hindrance is your mind. So if we begin to love the monkey mind for what it is, we need it to function. You cannot kill that ego. It is part of you, necessary part of you. Yet at the same token, you have to pull the reins back so that it's no longer the master of the show. The ego is such a beautiful servant, but it is a very terrible master.
Yes, absolutely. There's a song. It's called Overthinker by Closey.
Ah.
And it has, oh man, it's gonna bother me. Alan Watts. I get Alan Watts and Jordan Peterson always mixed up, but he says the ego is a good servant but a bad master.
Mm-hmm.
Oh
Oh, yeah.
wait, no, he doesn't say. I think he was talking about the mind, but
Yeah.
I mean, same thing
It's the
essentially.
same. It's the same. Yeah, the language is similar, and I love Alan Watts. I have a
Yes,
copy of "Become What You Are" right above my head.
I love that. Yeah, and that song is amazing, by the way. Closey's awesome. Before we wrap up, because we've already been talking for an hour, I'm curious about what your upcoming ambitions are personally.
Personally, it's in resonance. Word of the day. I have been speaking my story for a few years now, and I thought that was going to be a one-off. Like, when I did it, I was like, I'm just doing this once. After keeping it mum for like 9 years, I'll do it once, I'll release it, and then I'll let it go, kind of thing. And then that's not how it turned out, and I followed the path and whatnot. But it's really been about, for me, liberating the body from carrying it, and that involves taking accountability and acknowledging aspects of the story that standing on stage does not allow me to do, or doing these podcasts, which have a time, limit on them. So I have spent years writing, and, my journey began as an artist. So I've spent years doing that, but to get to the place, as you talked about, with the blocks and the purges and the invitations, to where you can tell the whole thing with radical compassion for all of the different parts. I've been unwilling to publish or put a book into the world until I could do that. And I'm very happy to say, because of all the work that I've been doing, I'm there now. And it's not about me or like some narcissistic thing, because truthfully, these are hard things to put out into the world. It's more about the healing of the feminine, what we've been through as a collective, and also what has happened in spiritual communities and the church and whatnot that has stifled so much of our power. And so as I know how difficult it is to heal from complex trauma, and as I have had some extraordinary lived experience, it's really right now about liberating that body without shame. Because as much as my mind and my heart can articulate some of these things to you and to others, there has been in like the sacral and the womb space things that just have taken much longer to clear. And I'm realizing now none of it had to do with the types of trauma I've healed. It hasn't been from the domestic violence. It hasn't been from early abuse. So much was what was inherited through a grief wound from the mother. And then what the mother inherited through, going back and looking at that and how has that shaped our collective narrative? And how do we take our power back from that? And how do we begin to see the multidimensional self as a whole and love each and every one of those parts? And because it's taken me since I started my master's thesis 20 years ago to get to this place, I trust that Spirit gave me this journey to communicate it. And so that's just kind of like where I'm at here and now. But it's ultimately because I know, the divine feminine is rising. I know that women in their power is part of the medicine of the future. And that it's going to be the persons who colored outside of the lines that help us get there. So in so many ways, it's really just to offer inspiration to others. But also, man, that took 20 years. I want to give them a Cliff Notes version of how to get through it. I want the book that nobody gave me.
Yes, absolutely. That's so exciting.
So yeah, that's really it. And then I'm as you know, I'm very passionate about our young little light workers. So I've just been anything I can do to get in connection with angelic light workers and really help these incoming young, I call them ancient hearts, but they're like young beings with very old souls, but to help them grow up outside of the current system so that they stay in their sovereign power and so that they know that these systems of the old are dying for a reason. And rather than be unconscious consumers, they become conscious co-creators. So that's a big part of it too.
I have goosebumps. I'm fully in support of that mission. I love that idea so much.
Thank you.
And I'm excited to read the book.
Oh, yay. I've had to go into this very I'm doing it in a yin way because I was an academic and everything was forced and, deadlines and what. And that's been really hard for me. I really feel like that's been part of the hindrance is I'm a Virgo rising and I want things structured and there to be a spectrum. But then my moon comes in as Scorpio. And it's we don't do systems and we don't do that. I'm all this is
right.
a lot.
I'm writing my book, the fiction, fantasy fiction story that has a lot of truth interweaved into it.
I love that.
But I'm not approaching it in a structured way at all. I recognize that inspiration comes when it does, and that you should catch that as it flows through you and take the opportunity. Sometimes you're not in a position to catch it. Sometimes you're at an IONS conference or something. Sometimes you're, doing meetings all day. But when you do have the opportunity to do so, it's it's important to get it down.
But you know what though? And then again, there's always portals and there's always energetic ways of taking the heart's level of inspiration and saying, okay, Spirit, we're doing it like this. Because I can tell you mentioned the conference 6 years ago when I left clinical psychology to create my current practice, everybody told me I was insane. And I knew I was at that conference with people that were coloring outside the lines. No one knew who I was. I took my computer, went into the lobby and was I'm creating this website and people will come. And then I made my website in the lobby and walked away.
Okay, shoot.
I was that worked so well, with everything. I was I think I'm just going to go in and write a couple chapters just to say, hey, I'm calling in the same energy, which is just, it's kind of merging that feminine yin with that masculine will of this is what's happening. I don't know when and I don't know how, but we did it before. We can do it again. It's good for the mind too, because, the mind, when you acknowledged limiting beliefs earlier, the mind will try to tell you the story it knows best. And if that story is failure, even though there's been a lot of success, but it's emphasizing failure, then that's what you're going to hear when those shadows come up. But if you can reprogram the mind by saying, hey, look here, I succeeded, and look here, I fell down, and then I got back up, 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 you be quiet. You can kind of
Yeah.
so the mind likes evidence. So yes, to that. But I'm totally with you. You can't force inspiration, and you have to trust the process, especially when we're talking about spirit and being in union with that.
Yeah. I'm a triple water sign. So
That makes sense.
I'm so I'm so watery. Like it's not even funny. I mean I even use the language. I'm just like you got to catch the flow. Like for me it's literally like there has to be a reservoir. I mean
Mhm.
sometimes I will dig one. Sometimes I have like enough of that masculine like structured intention, but other times like currently I'd say I'm kind of in a little bit of a drought with creativity and writing my book, and I think a lot of that is the association.
Mhm.
um like you know some
Mhm.
of my storyline, my plot, but it's a secret to everybody else. But yeah, I love that you have more of that go-getter mentality. Like you feel challenged and you're just like, you know what, I'm just gonna throw this out there and just to say, ha, I did it and told you so.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not like any expert by any means in human design, but the one thing I know is that I'm like a classic manifestor generator. I can create the most optimal outcomes and I can create the most hellish. So I have to be like, I have to
Oh
be
yeah.
literally like, okay, I know my capacity. I can like think something and make it happen. So I need to be very aware of my
Hmm.
intentionality with my purposehood and what I'm doing and where I'm at. So I'm a double earth, even though I've got that Scorpio, which just kind of like totally undoes all my earthiness. But yeah, it's that grounded aspect. And I think when you talk about some of the stuff we've talked about today with the astral and sensitivities to energies and whatnot, grounding becomes super, super, super important. I've joked for years that spirit led my parents, who are not spiritual whatsoever, to give me the name Brooke Grove because I constantly need grounding. So it's like, here's a little brook and here's a grove. Touch the earth, Brooke. Touch the earth.
Oh my gosh, that's great. I've never actually put two and two together that those are both like earthy things.
Yeah, my middle name is Ashley, which is of the ash tree. So
That's perfect.
apparently the whole thing. So yes, grounding's important. And I would say, like for anyone that's watching this and circling back to what we said earlier, as these energies continue to come in, the most important thing you can do, in addition to meeting your grief and just being compassionate in the invitation, is to ground and hydrate. Like it sounds so simple and it sounds so redundant when you hear it from persons, but I can't tell you how many people are living outside their bodies right now and how many people are chronically dehydrated from these flares. So please drink your water and please put your feet on the ground, whether it's inside or out. Just really allow your frequency to ground into the core of the earth because
Yeah.
she's ascending too. And we all need each other. We're in it together.
You said people living outside of their body.
Mm-hmm.
When people say find your center, I never really realized that that actually has like physical application. I noticed like at times when I go a long time without doing yoga or meditating or anything like that, that if I close my eyes, where I feel my consciousness sitting is sometimes not in the center of like my body. Like I'll
Okay.
feel it like way off to the left or something. And I have to like intentionally move it to be center with my body, and
Mm-hmm.
like I thought that was so crazy when I realized that that was a thing.
Totally. And, I mean, this is a pretty big topic. Perhaps we can approach in another discussion. But I've been writing a lot about what I call spiritual dysregulation. And that's part of it, where it's like people are walking the walk. They're like in the classes, they're at the sound baths, they're doing all this stuff. But like when I see their field, like their consciousness is nowhere near, alignment. Like it's like gravitating. You have to remember the auric field goes out 6 feet, like this. And so a lot of
Yes.
people's consciousness is not fully in the body. So spiritual dysregulation to me is where like you have the vernacular, you can speak the talk, you have the intentionality, but you're missing some very critical part of the work wherein you can embody it and keep bringing it back down through the channel, back down through the channel. This is why we see people that have Kundalini experiences and they're just like radically altered, because like they open the channel and then the consciousness splits. And they don't bring the consciousness back down into the channel. Well, the energy can't rise and fall the way that it's intended to. And that's where it ends up having after effects and consequences. But yes, it's a huge part of it, just bringing it in. And if you feel like I will feel, because I have so much stuff going on in my crown and my third eye with my NDE after effects, I will feel sometimes when I split off and I go and I'm like, okay, where'd you go? Oh, you're right there. Okay. And just think of that like little ball of light, you know, that you feel it, like your consciousness is right there, and just invite it back down and home, you know. And some people like to go root, crown, root. It doesn't matter. It's all about your intentionality in grounding it through the channel and keeping the channel open, but most importantly through the body. And that's why when you figure out that you're not living in the body, something as simple as putting the hand to the heart and the sacral and calling the energy back down and in can really help, because you're grounding the emotion, you're opening the heart, and you're remembering that you have this cosmic portal that exists in your vertebrae and connects you to creator. And as long as you intend, I mean, I feel it just talking about it, as long as you intend to come back to center, the energy will meet you, as long as the intention is there. And so again, it's like, if you feel that it's not there, call it back in.
Right. Call it back in and drink your water and get grounded. Put your feet on the ground.
We can do all three together.
Exactly. Okay.
It sounds elaborate when we say it, but it really only takes seconds.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, that's a great place to end this podcast. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day and having this conversation with me. It's been a pleasure.
Welcome. Always.